And as you know, we're going through Luke, verse by verse, chapter by chapter. And we began Luke a few weeks ago. Today we're going to pick up and we're going to finish up chapter 2. Today the title of the message is Father's Business. In Luke 2, 41 through 45, it says, "Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to custom. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know it, but supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey. But then they began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem searching for him." Now this is not an odd thing. 3 times a year, there would be 3 festivals, that is, during the year, that a Jewish man and his family would be required to travel on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, right? We had the Feast of Weeks, we had the Feast of Tabernacles, and we have Passover. And so everyone would return to Jerusalem during this time. And it would be a big thing. I don't want you to picture Mary and Joseph and their children just traveling there. I want you to picture caravans of people traveling there. Thousands upon thousands of people would have been coming into Jerusalem all together. Everybody that you know, right? Your cousins, your family, your friends, everybody's traveling together in this caravan and they're coming into Jerusalem and they would observe Passover and then they would all have plans to travel back out together. Everybody, including their dogs and everything, they're all going together. Now, I do not know what it was like for you growing up. I do know what it was like for my girls and I know what it was like for me, and each generation is different. Okay? So I imagine that in Jesus' time that it was even far, far more different than the way I grew up. But when I grew up, it was so much different than the way I allowed my girls to grow up, and way different than the way kids are brought up right now. But when I grew up, they told you to go outside, and they best not see you until it was dark, right? Like, I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear, I don't want to know anything, like, you know, like nothing. We would be out there. The difference is now that kids, including my kids, not judging anybody else, kids, they'll go outside and the sun will hurt them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just saw the sun with my bare eyeball and I had to come back in and I may not be able to go to school tomorrow. When I was a kid, we would go outside and we would purposely jump bikes into trees. And after we woke up from being unconscious, we would hide that fact from our parents, right? We don't want them to know that we did that. It's just a totally different time. So kids would be playing, and in Jesus' day, as they're going with the caravan and there's thousands of people traveling at the same time, he would have been running around with the other kids. It's not unnatural that they wouldn't know, that they would have been traveling and they would look around and been like, oh no, because kids weren't up under your skirt. They realized Jesus was not with them, and they had traveled a day. And so as they traveled that day and saw that he wasn't, then they turned around. In Luke 2, 46 through 52, it says, "And after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, 'Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress.' So it took 1 day for them to realize that Jesus wasn't with them, that he wasn't playing with everybody else that was around him. It took another day to return to Jerusalem, and then it took a day for them to search around Jerusalem until they found him. And then Mary's like, well, how could you cause us so much distress? How could you have done this? Now, this is a question to Jesus. And in the following passage, Jesus answers. He says in Luke 2, 49 through 52, he said to them, why were you looking for me? Do you not know that I must be in my Father's house? And they did not understand the saying that he spoke to them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. And his mother treasured up all these things in her heart. And in Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. A couple of things here. When he says, why did you go around looking for me? Not why, as parents, were you looking for me and I'm only 12 years old and I should be by your side. This is not the question that Jesus is asking. He said, why did it take you so long looking around for me? Because imagine, right? Here's what happened. He's 12 years old. They go into Jerusalem. They don't automatically go to the temple, or there wouldn't have been a whole day of searching. They're looking around where you expect to find a 12-year-old. They're going to the arcade. They're going to the soccer field. They're going to places where they think a 12-year-old would be, right? They're looking all around and they're like, where are you at? And Jesus is like, why? Why did you waste that time? Why are you looking around for me? You know where I'm at. Now, we were beating a drum right before Christmas, right? We're beating a drum and really picking on the song, Mary, Did You Know, right? Mary, Did You Know? Jesus said, and it says right here that Mary and Joseph did not understand. And the whole idea of Mary, did you know? Mary, did you know that your son was going to be the Messiah? Mary, did you know that Jesus came to save all, right? Mary, did you understand this? Mary absolutely did. And we beat that drum to death there in Christmas. Mary understood who Jesus was. Joseph understood who Jesus was. Now, there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of people out there that talk about Jesus' silent 12 years, right? That during those years, that these are things that Jesus did. Can you imagine a childhood with Jesus? I mean, he was perfect. He was perfect. Had to drive his siblings crazy, right? He's perfect. But we imagine this childhood of where every day Jesus is performing miracles, right? He's out there and he's leaning up against the apple tree. It's not apple season, but Jesus wants an apple, so the apple trees just started popping up on the tree, right? Well, this is what we imagine as a kid, right? That Jesus just was performing miracles left and right. And I would say that this incident right here argues against that. Because here's what happened. Joseph and Mary absolutely know that Jesus is the Son of God. They know that he's the Messiah. They know that Jesus has come to save all mankind. But for 12 years, he's been nothing but their son. Nothing but their son. Perfect, great, amazing, but nothing but their son. And so for 12 years, even though they know this is going to happen, they only see him in one way. And so when Jesus starts demonstrating what he's called to be done, they're astonished. They're taken back. Because for 12 years, they've only seen him in this particular way as their son, as an ordinary kid. He's an ordinary 12-year-old. This is why they didn't just rush to the temple. This is why they didn't know exactly where he was at. It's not that they didn't know who he was. They didn't know his future. They didn't believe. It was none of that. It's just they didn't see him and hadn't been seeing him in that way up until this point. And when he answers them, he says, how could you not know where I was at? Did you not know that I would be in my Father's house? Now, your Bibles, if you have them open, you might be reading along with me on the screen. And if you are, this is in the ESV. But if you're in your Bibles, there's different interpretations of this particular phrase. Literally, it translates, did you not know I would be in the line of my Father's house? So some translations say, did you not know I would be about my Father's business? Or did you not know that I would be in my Father's house? But it literally means in the line of my Father's house. That this is what I would be doing. It's pretty cool. Because when we think about it, Jesus just didn't go to the temple to attend the temple. He went there to be in the line of his Father's business. He's in there at 12 years old, interpreting Scripture, teaching other people. And there's a message in there for us today, too, because we're following Christ's example, right? And you know what else? We also are to be about the Father's business. We're the church. We're not asked to simply come and attend church, to make it part of what we do. We're called to be about the Father's business. Now, how do we do that? How do we do that? Well, first of all, we have to make God above all. In Ephesians 4 through 6, it says, there is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God, Father of all, who is over all and through it and in all. We have to make God above everything else, our priority. Now, We're Christians. It'd be a great argument if you said, well, I'm doing that. I'm here at church on Sunday mornings. And perhaps you are. But we're people, and often what comes off our lips is not truly what we're doing. How do we make God above all? First, it's about goals. That's what we do. We follow our goals. We all have goals, and we live out those goals. Thing is, though, sometimes we fool ourselves. Sometimes we believe that we have goals that are contrary to the goals that we actually have. If you have a goal of comfort, and let me change it to a much uglier word, a goal of laziness, right? Then that's what you will live out. If your desire, if your goal in life is I would like to be able to be at home, sleep as much as I want to, lounge around as much as I want to, and watch as much Netflix as I possibly can consume, play as many video games as I want to, eat as much as I want to, do what I want to, guess what? That's what you will do. Despite the fact that you might tell somebody contrary that you want to do something else, if that is truly your goal, you will find a way to do it. Okay? If your goal is your career, then that is exactly what you will put the effort into. Doesn't matter that if you tell somebody else my priority is my family or whatever and everything. If it's your career, then that's where you're going to spend your time. That's the relationships you're going to invest in. That's what you're going to pursue. You're going to climb that ladder. If it is money, if it is finances, then that is where you're going to invest your time. And it's very, very easy if that is your goal to make money. It really is. It's not most people's priority, despite the fact that they say they want it to be. But it is. It's very, very easy to make money. I saw something interesting the other day, and I was like, man, I should have done that. But if I had put aside $300 every paycheck, starting when I was 20, by now I'd be a multimillionaire. And in my mind, I'm like, man, why didn't I do that? Because it wasn't my goal, right? Like, I always wanted to do other things, but I could have. I read another thing the other day about this influencer who traded a bobby pin and kept trading up until she got a house. That's crazy to me. It tells me so many different things about society, about how many idiots there are out there, and also about how, if that is your goal, that you can work towards something, right? Popularity. If it's your goal to be popular, then that's what you'll work at. That's why we have all these influencers on social media that are doing the most ridiculous things. But you can do anything. And if it's your goal to be popular, you can be popular. Relationships. If you want to be a relational person, if that is your goal, then that's what you'll work towards. Goals. If your goal is God, then that's what you will work for. Colossians 3:2-3 says, set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Now, you know what comes hand in hand with goals? Commitments. If you are setting your mind on something, if it's what you're striving for, you will achieve it, and you will especially achieve it if you're committed to it. If your goal is laziness, then you will commit to it. And it doesn't matter that you're telling everybody, man, I'm going out and looking for all the work in the world, and I can't get a job and I can't do anything. You're not, because your goal is that you want to be in the house. You're committed to that. And it may not be that you're just an outright liar to everybody. It may be the fact that you yourself hadn't examined yourself and you're fooling yourself and you don't realize that this is your true intention, this is your goal, and this is what you're committed to. If your goal is your career and you commit to your career, it doesn't matter what your lips say. It doesn't matter if you kiss your wife every night and you say, you know what, you are my priority. If your commitment's to your job, it will tell, because that is where you will pour yourself into. Along all of those lines, financial, popularity, relationships, if those are your goals and you commit to them, you will accomplish it. It may not be your true goal. You may be fooling yourself. Let me, 2022. I get up and I go, man, you know what? And I'm just giving you a scenario. I get up and I'm like, I want to lose a lot of weight this year. This is the year, 2022. I go out and I buy calendars. I get Amazon to deliver it and everything. And on the calendars are these inspirational quotes and everything about, seize the day, and today you're going to do this, and you only need to lose 1% and everything. And each day I can mark off, and there's like this body weight thing. It's very shameful, like type thing and everything. But you got this, and you got your calendar up there. You post it on every social media site that you can possibly imagine, because you want people to know that you're going out there. You go and get a subscription to a health magazine. You go and join a gym. You do all of these things. You tell every friend and family member that you can, because you want people to keep you accountable. You're doing all the right things. You and your wife, you bust out there, you go to the grocery store and you buy all this nasty stuff to eat, right? Because you're committed. You're going to lose weight. A month goes by, and you have said this, you have done all these things, you are doing everything. But if you really looked at your schedule, you'll realize that you're spending more time in the restaurant eating dessert than you actually are exercising. Your lips have said that this is your goal. But your body betrays you. You are fooling yourself. It's not your true goal. It's easy to fool ourselves, and the only way that we can do anything about it, to break through what we're convincing ourselves of, is to confront the truth in our life. And once we confront the truth in our life and we do examine ourselves and we understand what our goals are, we understand what we're committed to, then we can readdress those things. But until that point in time, we can't. The church is full of people who utter with their lips that it's God above all, that He's a priority in my life, but does your body tell that story? Or is that just your lips? Because it requires a commitment to God. In Matthew 16, 24 through 26, then Jesus told His disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life would lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? What does that mean? To pick up your cross. What did it mean when Christ did it? Symbolic, right? When Christ picked up His cross, this is symbolic of His sacrifice. This is symbolic of Him laying His life down for our sakes. What does it mean when He asks us to pick up our cross? Same thing, to lay our life down. But what it's not asking us to do is, not to just make this head decision, well, I love Christ enough that I would lay my life down, picturing in our minds that we might drink some Kool-Aid with some poison in it or anything, and I just lay my life down. No, you know what that means, to lay your life down and pick up your cross? It means all of those things and more that I laid out before. You know what our life is made up of. Comfort, relationships, career, our jobs. All those things, popularity, our desires for finances and everything else, this is what we live for. This is our life. And Christ is saying that we lay that down and that we put Him first. That He becomes our life. He becomes our desire. He becomes what we're trying to go after. He is our priority instead of those things, and we lay those things down. Again, we can go back to the argument that you might say to me, well, Pastor Danny, I'm here this morning. What more do you want from me? If I was pursuing comfort, I'd be out on the beach right now. We live in the most amazing area, right? It's only 100 degrees outside and it's January. I could be out on the beach right now. I could be sitting in the stadium waiting for Tom Brady to play his last season game today. I could be doing so much if these were my pursuits. Obviously, I'm putting God first. Is that a habit? Or is that truth? Are you committed? I believe that you made a decision. But let me read that verse or that specific scene that Jesus had with his disciples from another book. Because commitment is more than a one-time decision. Commitment is something that happens all the time. That same passage, Luke 9:23, and he said to all, if anyone would come after him, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. See, I made a decision a long time ago to follow Christ. But am I daily making the commitment to pick up that cross? Not one time. Am I daily doing that? Am I laying down all those things in my life daily? Am I doing that today? Am I doing that tomorrow? Because that setting the goal and making the commitment to make God above all, that's what it means to be about the Father's business. And another thing that it means to be about the Father's business is that we represent Him. If it is Christian, it should be excellent. Titus 3:8 says, this saying is trustworthy, and I want you to insist on these things, so that those who have believed in God may be careful to devote themselves to good works. These things are excellent and profitable for people. To say something, if it is Christian, it should be the best, right? And that doesn't mean that just when you do something that's considered a Christian thing to the world that it should be the best. If you're a hat maker and you put John 3:16 on it, doesn't mean it should be the best hat. You are a Christian all the time, so the things that you do should be the best all the time. I give you so many stories about my past. I could give you 1,000,000 of them. I used to get in trouble so much when I was a teenager. But I remember this one time where my dad picked me up. And he's driving me home. And my dad was rarely around. He worked all the time. It was normally my mom that had to do this. But my dad picked me up, and he's driving me home. And he said something that really stuck with me. Maybe your parents said something similar to you. Before he said this, though, I want you to understand something. I was in high school, I was in gifted classes, and this is a big deal, and this is a big deal for me, especially because of how I grew up. I tell you all the time that I have ADHD, but when I grew up, I don't know if it's because I was in rural Georgia, I don't know what it was. It's not that ADHD, the term wasn't around, but we didn't know anything about it, and the people in my circles didn't know anything about it. But when I went through kindergarten and first grade, when people are supposed to learn their alphabets and learn how to read and everything, I struggled. I struggled to the point that in first grade, teachers pulled my mom and dad aside and said, he's special, very slow. And he's going to need special school because he's extremely slow. And he'll never, ever be able to keep pace with people his age. My mom and dad didn't want to believe it, right? So they pulled me out, and we were poor. Real poor. They pulled me out of that school, and they sacrificed everything they could to put me in a private school they couldn't afford. And I had to take the first grade over. And I barely, by a hair, passed. And the next year they couldn't afford it. They sent me back to the regular school. But I went through the second grade, and I barely by a hair passed. As a matter of fact, I think most of the teachers there had such sympathy for me that they would just give me the benefit of the doubt because I wasn't understanding the material. Third grade, same thing, just barely hanging on, not getting any of it. I was so far behind everybody that was around me. So far. By the time I got to the 5th grade, there was this teacher, and she didn't believe that I had a learning disability. This teacher believed something different. She believed that I just didn't want to learn from others because I couldn't understand how they were teaching it. So she advocated on my behalf. She convinced the principal and the superintendent that they would bring in a team, and they did. They brought in a team and they tested me, and they gave me several IQ tests. I blew those things off the chart. On several of the tests over the years, I even scored genius level on IQ. Now, I understand what IQ is. IQ is potential. Doesn't mean you lived up to it. Okay? But I did. And so they changed the way they taught me, because my brain doesn't process stuff like everybody. It's all jumbled. It's spaghetti up in my head. You wouldn't want to be up in my head. It's all jumbled. And so basically what happened from this point on in my life, the teachers would just give me the material and I would teach myself. That's the way it happened. The rest of my life. Fast forward, and there's a reason why I'm telling you this. Fast forward to the time that my dad picked me up. Because I am doing amazing in school. You give me a test, I will rock that test. If it's multiple choice, I don't even have to know the material. I can read a question and it just makes sense to me. My wife is a professor in nursing. I've never taken nursing. Sometimes she will show me like part of their test or something like that and say, how would you choose to answer? I would pass nursing because I am good at taking tests. If you give me multiple choice, I'll just figure it out. I was rocking school. Very proud of that. My dad picked me up and I have been, don't know what it was this time. I think it was something like I had toilet papered the principal's house or something. I don't know what it was, but I was very rebellious. And my dad picked me up and he's driving and he pulls the truck off the side of the road and he looks at me and he said, I know you don't understand why we get so upset. That's what he told me. He said, we are so proud of you. You are so smart, and you're going to do things that our family's never been able to do. He said, but when you do stuff like this, we're so disappointed in you. Because even though you're smart and you do good in school, when you do bad things, you drag our name through the mud. Because you're a Lewis, whether you're doing good or bad. And you represent us, whether you're doing good or bad. As a Christian, we carry Christ's name with us. And there are a lot of us that have been given gifts and talents from God that are amazing. The majority of you have gifts and talents that far outshine mine. But good and bad, we carry His name. We're His ambassadors. And so in everything that we do, not just on Sundays, not on Wednesdays, not just when we're gathering to help somebody, but in everything we do, we represent God. And it should be excellent. We carry His name. Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men. So in everything that we do it for God. When we go in and we're at our job, and maybe it's not the job for us. So many times we figure out that we're not at the right job or whatever, but today we're supposed to be at work. And so while we're at work, whatever we do, whether we agree with the people that are above us or the people that surround us or whatever, we're going to do it to the best of our ability. Why? Because whatever we're doing for God. And we represent Him in that. Right? And lastly, if we're about Father's business as a church, we're not just attending, that we're doing the things of God. We've made Him first, and we're representing Him well, then others should be aware of it. Colossians 1:27 says, to them God chose to make known how great among the Gentiles are the riches of the glory of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. It's funny the world that we live in today, right? And I'm not meaning to point out anything. You all are amazing. And maybe you all got it. But a lot of times, the way it works is we'll be in our surroundings, whatever our surroundings are, our workplace, our gym, or whatever we're doing in life, right? We'll be around people that we have some relationship with, right? And something will happen, man. We're looking for cues. We're looking to solve puzzles about who out there in the world that we can possibly share with. That's how we look at the world, right? We're in the office and somebody sneezes, 99 people go, COVID, COVID, right? And that one person from back in the far corner goes, God bless you, and you're like, oh. So you kind of go over there to them and you're like, you go to church somewhere? And they're like, yeah, do you go to church? Yeah, I go to Reliance Church. What kind of church do you go to? Like, that's how our conversation is, right? Like, we're spies. Like, we're spies, and we have to figure out the code, and we've been sent into this world on behalf of God to just bring a couple of people out of this territory and everything. That's how we operate, right? No, we're not spies. We're ambassadors. We're supposed to show up on the scene with the sirens going and the flags waving, and everybody should know. Everybody should know that you belong to God, that you are a child of God, and that this is what you represent. This is how we're called to live. When somebody looks at you and they wonder what the difference is in you, they already know that you're a child of God. Not what church you belong to, but that you belong to Him. That's where God wants us. We're His ambassadors. We're to be about His business. This morning, are you about His business? Right? I'll go back to this, and this is just my 2 cents. When life doesn't look like you want it to look, then usually you can go back to these basics. That God's not first. Something's off in your goals. Something's off in your commitments. Because if your goal is to do whatever, but you're not achieving it, then life's going to be crappy, right? It's going to be crappy because you're not validated. You're not living out your goals. You're not achieving those things. It may not make sense, and it surely doesn't make sense to someone who doesn't know God. But if God's first, then everything else falls in line. Everything else falls in line. It always starts there. I strive to be a good guy. I strive to have a good testimony. I hear back from others as I get older that that's the reputation that I have. But the friend that I'm able to be to other people is because God's first in my life. The parent that I'm able to be to my children is because God's first in my life. The husband that I'm able to be to my wife is because God's first in my life. Everything falls in line from there. This morning as Heath comes up, I'm going to ask you this. Today, is that where you're at?